Atkins targeting individual. Watch this Robert Duncan interview I just found. It's an hour and 20 minutes. Now, the first stuff where it shows him with Jesse Ventura, you've probably seen. I've watched a lot of the Robert Duncan interviews, but I've never seen this. I've never heard this interview. Not the first of it, but the middle of it. It's he's talking about gang stalking, direct energy weapons, and all that. Very good interview. Probably the best Robert Duncan interview I've ever seen so far. I haven't seen them all. Also, targets. If you want to, I can relate to the book of Job. Me and Holly's been reading Job. Job got everything took from him. God let Satan take everything from him to test him. And it just, man, that's the story of a T.I.'s life, if you ask me. But Job never lost faith in God, and God gave him back double. So please read Job if you're going through it. And try to get a commentary on there if you really don't understand the Bible, so you can understand what Job was talking about. Anyway, God bless all TIs, and please watch this and hit the like button.
People know my background from yesterday's speech, that my real specialty is artificial intelligence and robotics, and redefining what human beings will be in the future. So I was talking a little bit about, mind control in particular, and something that I worked on that I'm not proud of, but it's called the voice of God weapon. So there are 4 different techniques and technologies that can pipe voices into an individual's head. And once you can do that, you can control them using neuro-linguistic programming techniques. You're rewiring their thought processes and brains. There's something called hyper game theory. How do you, they want to see if they can manipulate people to do things that are irrational, but also walk them to their death. And so you can call it a eugenics program even. They're trying to, it was called mind hacking. So they're trying to hack a targeted individual, and the targeted individual will create mental defenses as best as they can. They'll go to their social networks. What do? They try to disrupt the social network, so you have no family or friends. It's a back and forth game that they're trying to find out the maximum probability of death, and the example that you use, where you'll commit suicide or you'll harm somebody, become a Manchurian candidate, or something like that.
One of the men behind the technology admits he created a monster. Dr. Robert Duncan put together the technology that allows the government to transmit thoughts and voices into the heads of Americans.
I've worked on projects for the CIA, Justice Department, Department of Defense.
So you know for a fact that these weapons that you worked on, they're being used domestically today?
Absolutely.
Are there citizens of this country that are being abused with this technology?
Worse than abused, that's a light word. They're being tortured. They easily could be broadcasting across the country messages to people and causing them extreme pain.
We've run into a few people that claim they got voices in their head. When they talk to us, they seem totally normal. Are these people crazy, or is the government doing this to them?
The government's doing this to them. They're called voice of God weapons.
So the targeted individuals aren't crazy after all.
These are people within our government at a certain level making these decisions, and they're not necessarily our president or our elected officials.
That's exactly right. They can't be removed, and they're difficult to find. They hide in the dark crevices of our government. It's worldwide, and it was intended to be worldwide for the New World Order government. They're trying to develop literally thought filters, so you can't have specific thoughts. They can erase memories, reprogram them with false memories. You can make them angry. You can alter their voice. All the emotions can be controlled. You can insert thoughts. It's totally stealing one's brain, stealing their soul. And that's what this technology can do. It can run other software, overlay it on your hardware called the brain. You're taking away someone's autonomy of thought.
Your brain is being seen in this equation as a machine. As
Correct. Oh, absolutely correct. This way we can control leaders of the world. This way we can get their secrets from other countries without them even knowing it.
they want to control everybody, right? They are interested in controlling everybody.
Ultimately, that's the goal. We have President JFK, who I think was just about to spill the beans more exactly about these mind control weapons. You're taking away free will now. Justice relies upon free will. Why would you want democracy in every country? Well, it's because of mind control weapons. We can control who gets into power. Well, then your government is not what you think it is. And I know this is horrible, and people need to know the truth. If you can imagine having two minds running some software on one brain, there are two of you in one mind.
When you clone a brain, brainwaves, and it's more complicated than I'm describing, but you are able to see what the other person is seeing, and you're able to hear what the other person's hearing, as well as influence them.
No touch torture is a whole new topic, a whole new category. Most people don't believe it's happening. You can be tortured in your own home. No one will believe you. Your brain has been rewired to feel the other. I call it the empathy machine. We can overpower all senses. We can create false sense of touch, make you think ghosts are touching you. We can, create smells that aren't really there, tastes. So you can imagine all the trickery that we're capable of doing, from hauntings to being beamed up by aliens, being anal probed. So unfortunately, it gets into very dark topics of trauma-based conditioning we do remotely, rape, torture, etc. The brain doesn't distinguish between these signals. And so at the comfort of your own home, it's as if they brought you into a lab for alien dissection and whatnot.
This isn't real. What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. This is the world that you know. The world as it was at the end of the 20th century. It exists now only as part of a neural interactive simulation that we call the Matrix.
The Human Gene Project. Well, now it's the Human Mind Project, the Global Brain Project. President Obama just recently funded a whole bunch of scientists to decipher the mind. Well, our previous president, same thing, George Bush, said the same thing. They're trying to decipher every possible thought and uniqueness due to culture and language and whatnot.
Dr. Robert Duncan, a man who holds multiple degrees from Harvard and other universities in computer science and artificial intelligence. He has extensive knowledge into the world of information and psychological warfare tactics and technologies. Dr. Duncan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me. And it is quite a pleasure to speak on one of the few free remaining information streams on the internet. As Thomas Jefferson warned us, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
Well, of course, what we're going to be talking about tonight is a very complicated issue and, of course, requires hours and hours and hours of investigation to even understand the surface level of the information that we're going to talk about. But just to start this off, can you give us a brief overview of both your research, the projects you've been a part of, and your education before you begin to research mind control technology?
Sure. All my life, I've tried to integrate machines with humans, from bionics to robotics. And my investigation, as of late, involved virtual reality for telemedicine and telerobotics for the Army. So in order for doctors not to be put in the line of fire, they would send out a truck, and the doctor could perform robotic surgery on the patients. Enhanced reality heads-up displays using NASA's heads-up display goggles and haptic feedback gloves, which means force feedback. You can manipulate a virtual world. And this research led me throughout time to take the next step. How do you create a virtual reality through direct neural inductions? And that means inducing neural signals from the outside world, very much like the movie The Matrix, except without a plug-in wire. So this investigation about 2.5 years ago led to the topic of mind control. And you very quickly realize this technology has existed for almost 3 decades.
How much of this includes the use of brain chips?
Very little. Brain chips were used in many investigations, both in the Army and other military groups, but the current technology requires no brain implants whatsoever.
Go ahead.
There was a lot of research done on monkeys back in the 90s with Duke University, where they could get monkeys to manipulate robotic arms, play video games, and these used implants, electrodes in the brain. But that's obviously not very practical and is not the ultimate goal of mind control. You would want to have a wireless method in order to both control populations, create brave voyeurs, to manipulate the human organism, as it's called in literature, precisely, every human function. And a colonel quoted back in the 70s bragged that he could control every human function at 450 megahertz. So that is the objective of mind control. It goes under many names. From the Eastern Bloc countries, call it biocommunication technology, bioamplification, psychotronic generators creating sociopaths that go on murderous rampages, hopefully for some sort of military target, bioelectromagnetic warfare, wireless cybernetics, and the list goes on for another 3 pages.
Now, you just mentioned that there were no brain chips required in creating someone to fulfill a task or influencing someone to feel a certain way. You're saying it does not require a brain chip. This is done through other means. How long have you known about this, and when did you start to investigate this?
Like I said, about 2.5 years ago, I became aware that there were technologies that are being used on the population that I didn't know about. And I'm a technophile. I love technologies. I love being on the cutting edge. And so, of course, my interest quickly took me to this wireless cybernetics or mind control technology that initially came out of the CIA. In 1943, President Truman signed National Security Act creating the CIA, and one of their main tasks was to create mind control technology, and made popular by movies like The Manchurian Candidate, creating programmed assassins like through Project Monarch, MK, which means Meinung Kontrola. It's the German for mind control, MK Ultra, Delta, MK Surge, and the list goes on. The military often calls their experiments into controlling humans behavior modification, but none of it is for peaceful purposes. It's all to take control of the enemy's mind or machines. And currently it resides under the Directed Energy Directorate of the Air Force. They have a program called Personnel Effects, where they describe a lot of these capabilities of making the target controlling their senses in every way so that they misjudge the horizon. For instance, in JFK Jr.'s situation, that's exactly what the weapon was supposed to do. It's a weapon of delusion, illusion, and deception.
Now, in terms of the large amount of people on the web that are claiming that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of cases of what some people call gang stalking. Now, my question to you is, how much of this do you think is paranoia as opposed to something legitimately happening? Or could it be possibly a side effect of some testing that may not be intentionally focused on them particularly?
That's a good question, and you're absolutely right. Gang stalking is a phenomenon that's really gotten a lot of attention on the internet, and I would say less than 10% of it is real. But if you go back to the documents of MK Ultra released through the Freedom of Information Act, it is listed right there as a method to gaslight, to make paranoid certain people. And this is used in the CIA bag of tricks to discredit an individual in public. So yes, much of what you read about is side effects from the weapon testing and drug testing, as well as a few real incidences. Probably less than 10% is what I would say.
We actually know quite a bit about MK Ultra, thanks to all, as you noted, the Freedom of Information Act, and of course all the stuff that's been declassified since. Naturally, of course, the church hearings of 1977 brought a lot of this to the consciousness at that time of the average American viewer. I remember ABC actually had a special on it in 1978 documenting what happened. I find that quite interesting, how the media forgot about that in light of this new war on terror and this new technology that they are experimenting with as we speak.
Absolutely true. And in fact, Frank Church is one of my heroes. I'm calling you from Boise, Idaho. This is where he was from. And it's important that we never forget what he brought to light, that these experiments on the American people and used unfairly against other people of the world is quite real and quite perfected. So absolutely, we should not forget that. There are psychological warfare tactics that help each generation forget about the atrocities of the past. So cultural memory, in effect, is sort of erased after 10 years, and it has to be brought back to light for us to remember what has been done and why we must be vigilant about our government and have the checks and balances in place to do it.
Now, you mentioned in your bio that you've done work for the Department of Defense and the CIA developing robotics in medicine, virtual reality in telemedicine, tank recognition and classification from satellites, and artificial intelligence used to track Soviet nuclear submarines. Can you tell us a little bit more about that work?
Probably not without being killed, but
just what you can.
Everything has a signature, and so classification is the very essence of all artificial intelligence. It's even what the human brain does. So the military has a lot of projects that utilize this capability, and examples of projects that I've worked on, you mentioned tracking the Soviet nuclear submarine fleet. Well, the submarines have particular signatures, but it's using sound. Satellites can give us images in the visual spectrum where we recognize tanks, for example. Well, humans, to bring this back to the topic, have their own unique resonance signatures based on their body mass and composition, as well as brain print signatures, which is a newer technology used today for lie detection. But it goes much more, it gets much more sophisticated as you dive into it, that every human function has been mapped out to some extent, and that we are all just slight variances from some mean. You map out the cognitive model of the average human, you can influence almost everybody on Earth to some degree.
I want to ask you about the use of sonar. And does this fall in any way or any category into possible ways that mind control could be tested on the public?
Sonar used mostly just underwater. There are acoustic technologies. American Technology Corporation produces a weapon that's classified as non-lethal that can project sound into people at a distance, very focused beam, and some of the capabilities are often called voice of God weapons. So you can trick somebody into believing they're hearing the voice of God. You can brainwash them to do almost anything. There's the Sony Corporation has 4 patents in the patent office for direct neural stimulation for gaming applications that utilize ultrasonics, which causes a mechanical deformation in the ion channels of neurons. And you can time it just right, you induce a signal or a virtual a reality experience. There's another company, Japanese Telecom, that has a pair of headphones that actually induces a small electric current into the inner ear, and you, with a joystick, you can control somebody's movement due to balance. So there are a lot of applications that are already coming out in the civilian world that are about 30 years behind the military technology.
And now the information is coming out. The things that we thought were theories 10 years ago are now things that they brag about on Defense Tech and other related publications. The reason I brought up sonar is because I do understand that, you know, there are certain similarities that humans have with other mammals. And in terms of whales and dolphins, we've seen a large number of them washed up upon the shore in Texas recently from the use of sonar. And I just wonder sometimes if there's any way that humans could also be affected by the same technology that clearly is affecting other members of the mammalian kingdom.
You know, I was asked the same question on Coast to Coast, and I did some humpback whale research in Alaska about 15 years ago, and there's no doubt that sonar can drive whales to beach themselves. Some Navy experiments involve using magnetic fields on sharks and strapping torpedoes on them to steer them to their targets. Similar experiments have been done on dolphins. And absolutely, we're all related to other creatures on this earth through the evolutionary chain, and we can be controlled in similar fashion.
Now, I want to get back, and thanks for explaining that, but what you were just about to explain before that was also important. I think we should move into the directed energy weapons. We have some slides ready on the screen, and I want to talk a little bit about what you were talking about. That is the implanting of a thought, a feeling, an emotion, some sort of reaction. What we do know and what we can stand by in terms of evidence and facts is that the technology does exist, the electromagnetic weapons to create a feeling of heat within the human body, entirely paralyze an entire crowd. They call them the paralyzing spotlights. There are also the sonic weapons that you talked about as well, the sound weapons, which they had at the RNC in 2004. There are so many of these different forms of technology that relate back to directed energy weapons. How exactly does this work in terms of technology interfacing with the human mind?
On a gross scale, you can affect people's behaviors. And back in 1976, on the 200th anniversary of this country, the Russians started beaming a very powerful psychotronic signal over the population, and the Army intelligence came forward and said, we aren't really sure what this is about, but it looks like they're trying to lull the population into a hypnotic state, relax them. This weapon can be used to affect entire populations. There's a famous town called Taos, New Mexico, that was attacked by this weapon system. People got dizzy, they heard a buzzing in their ears, and some got nosebleeds. So over a population, you can control and try to conform their thought processes. This, of course, could be abused and is abused by manipulating elections or the general sentiment of the crowd. Now, a colonel from the Danish Air Force working with the U.S. Back in the 70s again, claimed that he observed a person who was being beamed with radio frequency energy from the next room, that they could induce any emotion into him. And the most interesting one was white hot anger. So they can make people violent with just a simple brain entrainment, induction in the human nervous system.
Now we do know that technology that you speak of has been used in Iraq. That part is public. Now we find ourselves facing a school shooting, and I'm going to be fairly objective with the story. I'm going to be presenting a lot of facts that are available up to the minute at this point. What is your take on this recent school shooting and other school shootings and other amazing and unthinkable acts of violence that we've seen in just the last year alone?
It's truly depressing for me to see these world events, because the very nature of the weapons system involves plausible deniability. People can't understand the sophistication and exactness of this weapon system in inducing aggressive behavior, and you can't see the energy. And what you can't see, people often don't believe. There are many events throughout history that are questionable. This technology is so precise that it could have been used to make JFK Jr. crash his plane and misjudge the horizon. It could have been made, it could have caused the driver of Princess Di to crash into the median. It truly has this power, and there's no way for the public to ever know if these were natural accidents or natural psychotics going crazy. It's just that there have been so many examples that totally fit the profile of school massacres, for example, and that it can be used to induce white-hot anger and assassinations. One of the more famous scripts the CIA uses is the love addiction, the obsessive love addiction. Now, they use that for the the John Lennon assassination. The one, John Hinckley, for example, also had this love obsessed delusion. And this is, again, scripted, coming directly out of CIA documents, that these are the discrediting tactics for programmed assassins that they've been working on, such as Project Monarch and the newer, still classified project codename Snow White. So absolutely, school massacres can be induced using this weapon. And what would the reason be? Well, it's to take away the weapons that can overthrow a tyrannous government, taking away rights slowly. So the public reacts and the press reacts with, we must take away guns from people. And so it seems to fit this sort of so-called New World Order strategy quite nicely.
I remember reading last week when the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense released a 90-page report where they prophesized, I would say, the year 2035 and the kind of weaponry that will be used and for what reasons at that time. One of the things that was mentioned was the use of electromagnetic weapons, not so much for mind control, but for taking out an entire city's electrical grid. That includes satellites, communication devices, cell phones, televisions, telephones, etc., etc. I find that to be quite amazing.
Yes, they're often called E-bombs, electronic warfare bombs. And while on a sort of electronic mass destruction weapon, that is interesting, can be done.
Because I would think if I was going to invade a country, and if I was one of these sick bastards in control right now of the nuclear warheads, that's what I would drop first, an electromagnetic weapon, and then move in.
Absolutely, and disabling communications can cause panic, as well as all the weapon systems are pretty much disabled since everything runs on electricity.
So to keep this simple though, Robert, before we're done, we're talking about a technology that works both ways, scanning minds and, of course, implanting a thought. I guess you would say it's similar to a set of headphones, that you can both hear the acoustic sound and, of course, use them as a double application as a microphone.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the only way that the technology really works effectively is the bidirectional communication. So it involves the most invasive form of privacy as well as control. And, I mean, every single right that the Constitution affords us and the Bill of Rights is taken away with this technology. This is why it's being kept more secret than the Manhattan Project, is that people would get very scared that their country has been overthrown if they knew this technology existed.
That's a good point. A lot of people wonder if there was something alternative to know about 9/11, that more people would have talked about it. Tell me a little bit about the Manhattan Project and how many people were involved in keeping that secret.
Oppenheimer was the most famous scientist that was working on it at the time. A lot of people give credit to Einstein for originally bringing over some of the theories about energy and matter conversion. But they were able to keep the development of this weapon secret for many years. And of course, as with all technology, the military gets it first for all the bad uses they can use it for, and then eventually it gets transferred to the civilian scientists and population for all the good uses. So you give the militants fire, they will burn down villages. You give it to the civilian population, they will cook food, kill bacteria, and keep warm with it. And that's just the way the technology evolution works in our system.
I want to thank you very much for coming on the program and providing us with the information that you could in the short span of time. I know I learned a little bit more, and I hope others did as well. For more people that want to learn more, where should they go?
They can go to a couple websites. Hopefully you'll post a couple links on yours. But there is the American Cognitive Liberties Association, which I recommend. And they can Google that up, and that provides a lot of non-biased articles that's written by current scientists on some of these technologies.
Well, thank you. And of course, they can go to your website, thematrixdeciphered.com.
You're live.
Hello, my name is Tyrone Alexander Dew. I am the author of Satellite Directed Energy Weaponry Terrorism, Illuminati Got Me. It covers 30 years of my life of being a victim of satellite directed energy weaponry terrorism, the same crime that these young men tried to explain before the horrific end of their life. I don't know if you remember Aaron Alexis, September 16, 2013. He went to the Naval Yard where he worked at, and he murdered 12 people. After that, there was Myron May, a young successful trial attorney for the district attorney in New Mexico. He quit his job abruptly, went to Florida where he grew up at, went to Florida State where I believe he attended college, and shot 3 people. His suicide note mirrors the experiences that I wrote about. Today, there's only one guy in our lives that could actually explain what's going on with us, and his name is ex-CIA engineer, Dr. Robert Duncan. Can you please tell the people what we're complaining of?
Yes, I've worked on a lot of these technologies, and I have a non-disclosure agreement with the government, which I absolutely respect. I worked for the on projects for the Department of Defense, CIA, Justice Department, on such things as writing the artificial intelligence code to triangulate on nuclear submarines, inner city gunshot fire, the EEG control of robots, and the list goes on. But my recent research and my interest has been in 1,000 interviews that I have done to expose some crimes against humanity. And I've been collecting this data for over a decade, interviewing people like you to understand what are the methods of these no-touch brainwashing, mind control, and behavior modifications experiments that have come out of the CIA initially, that it was discovered under a project that's a very generic name. They keep changing project names, MK Ultra. And they also use stalking methods that were developed under the FBI called COINTELPRO, counterintelligence. And it's out of control groups and populations and people that may make more of an influence in social cohesion that they're targeting and interested in.
Well, the technologies that we're complaining of, actually they're putting voices into people's heads. That is what these young men were complaining about before they committed the crimes. Aaron Alexis, he felt as if he was being followed. Now, you might not understand this, but they're using something I believe called extreme low frequency waves. These extreme low frequency waves, once they put a voice in your head, they're able to cause pain. And if you understand how, that could affect you, can't sit at work, you can't go to school, you can't do anything. Myron May complained of the same thing, and both of these young men were complaining of, they're trying to force me off my job, they're trying to scare me off my job, and they finally did that to them. So Duncan, can you explain how people are hearing voices in their mind? Or can you explain that can you at least admit that it's true that these technologies exist?
They absolutely exist, but I want to take a step back with you.
All right.
What did these two young men, what was their real message? Why did they feel they needed to go to violence to get their message out? And did that work?
Well, to be completely honest with you, it gets to a point, I'm a victim, so it gets to a point of where you feel like you've tried to have a quality of life. And what's happening to you, there's no way to stop what they're doing to you. And it never should have been done to us in the first place. So they all felt like the only way they can get their message out of my life is being ruined, I'm hearing these voices in my mind, they're causing extreme pain, was to go out and actually commit violence. So did it help? Well, for me, if it wasn't for Aaron Alexis, my mother and family would have possibly thought I was still crazy. I published my book a month before that, and my family was wondering, what the hell is this guy talking about? He's talking like he's hearing voices, he's feeling pain. They've been doing this to him for over 30 years. And I was actually in the basement. My mother called me upstairs. She says, Ty, come here. I ran upstairs and, a little upset because now I went from a guy who's made about $2 million before I was 30, and it was taken from me by the person speaking to me, causing pain, and telling me if you want us to make the pain stop, this is what you have to go do. So they would force me to go to strip clubs, force me to go to, spending my money very irresponsibly. So, and they would say things like, well, you got to live like your kind of people like to live. And when they say that, they're referring to the ignorance of the black community. How they go out and ostentatiousness, all the guys with the gold chains on and all of that. I didn't want to live that life, and I don't think these two young men wanted to either. So did their message get out and did it help? Well, it did help, but I do not condone going out committing mass violence.
Good.
And I don't think you condone that either.
No.
There are other ways to get your message out. But Aaron Alexis, he worked IT. He was intelligent. Myron May, successful trial attorney. I mean, we work our entire lives. Most of us come from the projects, or we come from some poor neighborhood, and now we are a project, and there's no relief from it. Aaron Alexis, he was told to go take all these different kind of pills, I believe, Trazodone, whatever it was, and Myron May also. And these pills did not help these young men. And if you're a sane person, and you're taking prescription meds, what's next? And it's not helping. The way that we know that we're targeted individuals is that the person speaking to us makes sure that we understand they're in complete control.
That's right.
That's
called neuro-linguistic programming, and it's an entire field in the Army, and we use it in propaganda. But using this, what's often called voice-to-skull technology, literally piping subliminal messages and overt messages to the target that no one else can hear, you can alter behavior. Well, that's why commercials work. I mean, you're altering behavior based on the programming of television and radio, and you can do that with human beings. And so they were programmed. There's no doubt in my mind that they were true, what are called targeted individuals. And all that means is they were brought into these secret government programs that I mentioned earlier, and they're being experimented with. Now, maybe there is an end goal here, and we can only hypothesize about that more terror and more violence there is in our society, perhaps then they can get the population to take away gun rights. We don't know what their true end goal is here, but we can only speculate.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. With the That's, I was putting out a lot of tweets after the airing of Alexis. I said, the government has turned this into a debate about gun violence and mental illness, when the true debate should be about cybersecurity. Because all of these technologies are done remotely. Am I correct? This is all this all be done remotely?
This is all done remotely now. They used to have to put you in a laboratory. Then they would run the electroshock, give you drugs, use hypnosis, and then they could create split personalities and create Manchurian candidates. Now it can all be done remotely in the privacy of your own home. In fact, they prefer isolation.
Jeez. So you mean like when a lot of this can be did while we're sleeping, a lot of this programming, for those hours of sleep, those hours of just being at home, and these young men, you don't have to have a chip implanted in you?
You do not. You not have to have a chip implanted in you, but and they used to do that. There's Dr. Delgado, and he used to put chips in human brains, and they had wires and radio controls in their heads, and you can alter emotional states of his subjects. And but the technology has advanced much further than that. There are theories that that a sensitizer needs to be put into the individual, make them more electromagnetically sensitive under certain frequencies in order to modulate the brain, to pipe in the new information. And that gets to your other question, well, how do you transmit speech into a human being? And I can talk freely about 3 techniques. There's bone conductance. And that's, people might experience this by biting down on a spoon and flicking it. They can hear it in their head, this loud,
the vibrations.
The vibrations that goes into the inner ear. There's one called EG heterodyning, and I'm going to skip that one. There's one called ultrasonic heterodyning, and that is using ultrasonic sound waves and interfering them in a modulated low frequency state that the human brain can understand, and that's very directional and targeted. They often call it the audio spotlight, as another name for it. There's the microwave hearing effect, or radar hearing effect, that was discovered by a couple radar engineers. If they stood in front of the radar dish, they could hear a buzzing, a tinnitus. And quite interestingly, is a lot of TIs hear that tinnitus. And that, arguably uses what's called a heating effect, and it expands the brain ever so slightly, vibrates it, which goes to the inner ear. The EEG cloning and heterodyning is much more complicated, so let's wait on describing.
Yeah, I understand that. Please don't complicate or the audience. Don't confuse them. What I really want to know about is the ability to control emotions.
So it's very interesting. We think we're so unique as human beings, but we have an emotional signal cluster. Now, in universities, you can see this research being done, and you can imagine, the military and other agencies have probably about a 30 to 50 year advantage than what the public will know about. And you can research this, that certain parts of the brain light up under certain emotional states, and you can also inject those same signals into other human beings. So let me give you an example from the 1970s. An Army colonel, intelligence officer, stated that the Russians were broadcasting a psychotronic signal in the microwave frequency to the US. And so we started doing the same to them. And the final conclusion is they were trying to placate, to relax our population so we don't go to war. They thought we were the aggressors, and that's a quote from him. And so you can do it over a population. We know that. It's like putting Prozac in the water supply to calm the population, and so they don't protest, they don't care. But you can also do it to individuals, and very specifically. You can clone emotions onto them outside of the lab, and it's part of this remote technology.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, that's something I experienced myself, and it really got to the point of where I wasn't sure if it was, I knew it wasn't me, you know, because they were cloning the anger, you know, the sadness, the happiness, and everything, and I was going, these are my emotions, you know, I'm perfectly fine before I'm inflicted with these vibrations that I feel. And so,
Good.
Sorry.
So, when they're cloning your emotion, you really have to be careful to figure out, is it your emotions that you're feeling, or is it something that's being inflicted on you? One way to tell that you're possibly going to feel vibrations going through your body, you know, which amps up, you know, your natural emotions, or, you know, whatever it is that they're doing to you.
Well, human beings naturally, we're driven by our emotions, so it's the perfect lever in controlling a human being. And so they very much study how injecting different emotions in different situations will alter the behavior of the human being. And they've done this with monkeys, they've done it in a lot of different research that your audience can look up on the internet.
That's interesting. Well, you heard it from a guy who knows that it can be did. Now, these young men here, they complain about something that most people will never understand, and I'll try to explain it in my book before their events ever happen. It's called gang stalking. And from my experience, it's when other people, other humans, are hearing the same person speaking to us through using this microwave technology or whatever, or satellite, you know, whatever it is they're using. And they're told to follow us around and, you know, harass us as if we're doing something wrong. And these people believe that they are, you know, doing something, you know, for the government. You know, they believe that we're terrorists or anything like that, you know, and their job is to follow us around, to harm us. Some of them are even told to murder us. I mean, you might not believe this, but it's true. Aaron Alexis, he complained of being in the airport. You know, he swore, he could have swore up and down that these people were following him, and it's very well possible that they were. Now, he could also have been tricked, because they have something called voice cloning technology, where they can clone a person's voice and play it back to you in your mind using the extreme low frequency wave technology. Myra May complained of the same thing. He complained of having, several police interactions and people following him. Now, I've had issues where in my life that I've known for sure that they've used the police against me, but I can't prove it, you know? Now, their message was lost in the media. Now, we all know the media has a problem with covering the truth, but there is a huge problem with what we're talking about. You know, this is not, everyone has lack of knowledge with this. I mean, here's a guy who's actually worked with these technologies. He didn't create them, you know, he didn't develop them, he just helped with the research, and well, he helped with the research and development of it, I guess. Am I correct?
Yeah, research and development in different areas. This is the greatest weapon system, weapon of mass control over every population on Earth. And so there are thousands of scientists working on it, and they don't even know their small part because everything's compartmentalized.
So that's how secretive they keep you guys with NDAs and everything. Hey, you work on this, you work on that.
You don't talk to anyone else. There's only a need to know clearance, and but somebody is putting this together and using it on the
You're
population.
right. You're absolutely right. I mean,
scientists are like children. We just like developing stuff. We like playing with it. We don't know what it's going to be used for.
Yeah. And you're probably scared to ask.
Yeah.
You're probably told not to ask.
Yeah, you're told not to ask. That's right.
Well, you know, it's interesting to me that you and I can sit here and have this conversation, and people will still say, I don't believe it. You know, that's kind of like those are the same idiots who will go to a Lamborghini manufacturer and say their cars don't go 200 miles an hour. So you're going to tell a guy who's actually, you know, dealt with this technology, you know, or a guy who's created the car.
But you have to admit, it is really unbelievable.
Yeah. But look, Duncan,
this is stepping on the toes of God.
You're not lying, but listen though, these guys, their lives or the car accident at 200 miles an hour with this technology. My life.
They decided, in order to break this news story, they're willing to sacrifice their lives and other people's lives and call them collateral damage, which I do not agree with. But their methods, I don't think, worked because our media is so controlled. The powers that be, the the 4 major news channels and mass media will not cover this at all. I mean, they're controlled by governments.
Yeah, I mean, their whole thing was mental illness, gun control.
That's just a way to discredit something that people don't understand. They don't talk about the true motives behind it. They just say mental illness, too complex for you to know. There are other discrediting words. You can call someone dumb. Don't listen to them. Yeah. They're just discrediting words. Yeah. Listen to the information. Actually, get the story and do your research. And then you'll find that there is a whole lot of truth that people didn't understand.
You've been doing research on targeted individuals after you figured out that, hey, this shit isn't right.
Yeah.
And
it's totally immoral.
What's the oldest or the first targeted individual that you can research going back to?
Well, you're one of the oldest. I found some scripts. Probably from 1962.
62.
But, they can't be verified. Mm-hmm. I do know in 1976 there were a large number of TIs that came forward. And it seems that every time the military gets a bigger budget, the Department of Defense and the black budgets with the intelligence agencies, the number of TIs that come forward increases. So they're grabbing more projects, improving this weapon system. And the majority, I think, is efficacy testing, improving the weapon system.
Now, in your experiences, when they begin doing this testing on subjects in the advanced population, who are the people that they, first begin to target?
Well, originally, and there's a long history of CIA and Army and you name it, they would target the black community, those impoverished, those that had no voice in the community, those that can't speak up for themselves.
Right, sort of like the Tuskegee experiment, when they actually took all the black people and made them believe that, you're getting free health care, or they pumped syphilis into them.
They actually pumped syphilis into them, and many of them died. And presidents later apologized. I can't believe we did that. Well, we're doing the same thing now, but even worse, torture experiments. Euthanized as behavioral modification. It's literally stealing someone's soul and future and liberty and happiness, everything.
It's interesting you bring up the soul. I believe you wrote a book called Project Soul Catcher.
Right here.
Oh, yeah, that's it. People wonder, am I religious? What's your background? Well, my experience is, if you understand anything about the human body, it's pretty much frequency waves firing off from the brain whenever you tell your arm to move, whenever you close your eyes or anything. And it seems to me that this technology has found a way to completely mimic every possible brain wave that the human being can fire off. And if that's the soul, then we pretty much are soulless walking around. I don't know if that's true. I mean, I don't. Is that?
It's a matter of definition.
And I've never read your book, by the way. I'm just, I might read it after this. But for many years, I felt isolated. I knew nothing about you. I didn't even know that you were out here trying to, raise awareness about this. And it wasn't until 2013, I believe. Yeah, it was 2013 that I first heard about you, and that was with the Jesse Ventura conspiracy theory show. That guy tried to make it seem like you were.
He made me seem like the bad guy. I was behind all of this. I think people can see through that. I worked on portions of the technology, but I am not the mastermind, as he called me, of this great evil.
All right. So now, a lot of these targeted individuals, including myself, we complain of pain. Is it possible? I know it's possible, but I just want to know, these frequency waves that are traveling through our body, because we can hear these people. Let's just say these are sound waves. Let's just say they're sound waves. If they cut them up to a certain decibel level, for me, I felt like my brain was being electrocuted. And these guys are complaining of the same thing. Is that something that's factual, or is it something that,
No. Well, there's some truth to it, that a lot of these weapon systems that target the human nervous system and the brain can cause brain damage if they're done with too much power. But really what they're doing, on the most part, is just making it feel like they're frying you, making you feel pain. And this is why it's called no-touch torture, and why it's so secret. And look at how long it took us just to have the president admit, yeah, we tortured some folks, you know, and that's physical torture.
Yeah.
This is actually even worse through the perception of the human brain, but it's harder to prove because you don't have marks or scars on your body. You just have mental scars. And so how do you show those? And then they just write you off as, well, must be mental illness. So they have a perfect cover, and this will be exposed eventually. The civilian technology will catch up. And, you know, I've said this for over a decade. They'll pretend they just invented the technology and they'll make sure it's regulated and they won't use this for human rights violation. But they're doing it now, and they're just keeping it very covert. It's a cover story. You know,
well, you know, Myron May complained of feeling like he was being burned, and I have felt that before myself. Yeah. And when I did my research, you know, after all this happened to me, you know, and I started writing my book, I started trying to figure out, well, what the hell are they doing to me? You know, I could say what's happening to me, but does it, you know, is there any proof, you know? And when I found out, they had something called ADS.
An active denial system, which works on 95 gigahertz. It's built by Raytheon. The Marines asked for it in the Gulf War, and they were denied. And Secretary of the Air Force, Michael Wynn, said we must test it on our own U.S. citizens so the international population doesn't get angry at us for the long-term effects first before we use it in war. He was fired right after that, so I assume it was for this comment. But it shows you what they think of us.
Yeah, I mean,
we're test subjects. We're all test subjects if you're not in the military.
Well, even I would have, to be honest with you, I would have preferred that they tested this on people in the military than me, and I'm sure Aaron, Alexis, and Myron May, you know, feel the same way.
And that causes a burning sensation. It generally won't cause any permanent damage. It only gets absorbed into the very first layer of the tissue, and it stimulates the receptors that feel a fire, that feel heat. And so, and it works from a kilometer of a mile, a kilometer and a half away.
A kilometer and a half?
Yeah, that's out of most people's shooting range.
Yeah,
you can't the best sniper. You can't defend yourself. No.
And there's no way to get away from this. I mean, we are people who are complaining about things that are happening to us in our own home, while we're at work, while we're out in public. And people who don't believe us because they can't see it, you know? This is all remote technology that we can't get away from, and none of you are safe from it either. For some reason, you guys just aren't being tortured. I'm wondering, what is it going to take for the American people, you know, to finally say, you know what, maybe these guys aren't mentally ill. Maybe this stuff actually exists. I mean, if you look at my book, I actually researched all the patents, you know, and that was something that surprised me. Because I'll tell you what happened. My ex-girlfriend, you know, I came home one day and told her, you know, after $2 million was taken from me, and I had went through so much going to jail, and, you know, I told her, I said, and these people, they really messed up my life. And she's going, what people? And I said, you know, it's these Nazis, you know, talking to me using satellite. And she said, have you ever looked this up? I said, this, you know, none of this would be on the internet, you know, because for several years, I thought that I was, you know, I lived isolated because I never wanted to say anything to anyone because there's no proof. Do you know when she looked it up, Duncan, there was all kinds of stories, and not only stories, but there's actually patents for these technologies that date back to the 50s and 60s. So it's kind of like, who are they using these technologies on? You admitted that citizens in your Jesse Ventura, you say that American citizens are being tortured. Who are the citizens that are being tortured? It quite possibly is the people who are complaining. So what would it take for you guys to listen to someone who developed it,
well,
helped develop it?
This brings us to, I think, your concluding point, which is, what do you want Americans to do? Why are we having this interview? Myron May, I just listened to his radio show, his interview before he went on his killing spree, and he said, I want a congressional investigation. I want American media to cover this and look into it. What is your purpose?
Well, my whole purpose is just to get the word out that this is happening.
So, to alleviate other people's suffering, so they don't get confused what's happening.
I don't want, my whole thing was this, I don't want their families to believe that they were mentally ill. Aaron Alexa's sister is writing a book, and she's fallen into the whole media, he was mentally ill. Your brother was not mentally ill. Myron May, his family thought he was mentally ill. His cousin, I sent him a couple of books and a few bracelets. You know, I designed a satellite electronic harassment awareness bracelet, which is something when I was going through my depression of suicide, it actually got me out of it to really be able to start putting this, putting the word out. If I'm dead, I can't say anything. So for me, it's more so about listen to us. Understand we are not mentally ill. These guys here, successful, very successful. They were more successful than a lot of people who didn't go to school, who didn't put forth the effort.
No, that's right. I know Myron's story better than I know Alexa's story, and Myron follows these scripts. So the CIA have these torture scripts. They have to walk you down a certain path, and I don't want to get too complex, but it's called hyper game theory. And his script is exactly what I have interviewed 1,000 people for. His is the main one that they use on most people. So I have no regret calling Myron May a true targeted individual put in these government programs.
It's interesting. Myron May and Aaron Alexis, they didn't really get to the point of where I was with this particular technology. There's something, Duncan, maybe you could explain this. I have these days where I forget things. It's not that I forget, my memory's being wiped, I believe. Is that possible?
Well, yeah, the military's been working on memory erasing drugs for quite some time, and the CIA, the MK-Ultra experiments that were exposed, they wanted to create a programmed assassin that could commit a crime, forget it, and pass a polygraph in case they were ever asked about it. So I'm sure they're just doing memory experiments with you.
The memory experiment is that possible to be remotely inflicted as well without drugs?
Yeah, absolutely. Under the right circumstances.
Right.
Now, we're not talking every moment of every
No.
second, but under the right
It's
circumstances.
just certain moments of my day, I completely forget. It's like I have no recollection of what happened. Also, there's something called forced speech, man. And it's possibly going to, be the reason why I won't be around anymore. But I have these days of where I can be sitting talking to you, and I feel a few vibrations, and I feel like something, go through me. The next thing you know, I'm saying words that I would never say. I mean, we can have a whole conversation, and it's not even me talking.
Well, yeah, and that, you're getting into a very complex topic, but initially that capability was used to screw up the speech of potential politicians. And so they're testing it, they're improving it, but let me ask you, doesn't it feel like Tourette's almost?
Yeah.
Something that you're saying things that you would never come out of your mouth, and they don't have to be, swear words per se.
No.
And this is, again, like I said, very complex. Your audio cortex has been mapped, and they're also always piping in subliminal messages into your brain. I mean, you're on the list, you're on the network, the mind network, and so some of that will come out through your own motor cortex, the actions of verbiage. It's a weird sensation. I know it's going to be difficult for you to describe, but it's quite common amongst TIs in a certain portion of the program. The programs can last from 3 months to years, like in your case, many years. Yeah. So you just haven't been taken out of the program yet. They're still experimenting.
But this is something that, the whole forced speech, I can't find a patent on it. I don't know, I've never really heard of it.
There will not be a patent on this.
There won't be a patent on this. But I mean, it's one of those things where I have to deal with the repercussions of what I'm being forced to say. And I'm trying to explain to people that, look, this isn't me saying this, and even after I'm forced to say it, I try to apologize.
I know, but it's your body.
Yeah,
so,
you're right.
Your body gets the repercussions, whatever those are.
That doesn't, with any of you, I ask you this, what is worse? The fact that I'm saying what I'm saying, or the fact that I'm being forced to say it. You know, I don't think anyone would agree that, oh, but what he said is horrible. I think the more important thing is, why is he saying this? You know, what's forcing him to say these kind of things? I mean, I could be forced to say some of the meanest things.
Well, there are things called chatterbots that I worked on that can be integrated into this weapon system that constantly cause the mind to talk to this person or perceived person. It's actually it's a computer, and it'll keep the mind spinning. But that bot, when in the right conditions, can cause you to speak some of its language. And these are not programmed nicely. These are demons. I mean, they're very bad, vocabulary that's going to be cloned into your head and into your mouth.
So you and I having a conversation. This has happened to me before. It gets to the point of where I'm repeating what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
You know, and
exactly.
It's almost like I'm talking. You know, it's like my brain is trying to comprehend.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
well, it's puppet mode. I've heard TIs that have been made to slap themselves. You know, that literally it's puppet. They've created cerebral cortex cloning, and initially I think the CIA term was REHIC, remote hypnotic intercerebral control, and it's like a hypnosis. It has a little influence over you, but it should not have enough that you're going to harm yourself or harm anybody else's, the way hypnosis works. And that's kind of how TIs have described what you're going through.
Have you ever, I don't know, any other... So Duncan, a lot of TIs are complaining of being threatened with promises of freedom. Myron May, he was threatened with, if you go out, he actually put a Facebook post up, if he committed murder, that he would get his freedom. In my life, I've been threatened with, if you don't do something that we're telling you to do, then we're going to murder your grandmother. And actually, she wasn't murdered, but what I didn't do, within minutes, when I ran upstairs, she has a pacemaker, and she began slumped over in a wheelchair, and we ended up having to use a life alert to send her to the hospital. So that took away all the idle threats. So I became completely, pretty much like whoever the hell was talking to me, I'm like their slave, It's like you're threatening my family, you're showing me that you can do that.
And that was outlawed by U.S. protocol, even in the torture documents that were released under Obama. Threats of killing someone's family is not allowed, but they do it anyway. And it's a common tactic in torture and for behavior manipulation and interrogation. You don't tell us what we want to know, we're going to kill you and your family and do this to them. And so almost all TIs, and that's also why I know Myron May was a real TI, they get that script. Mm-hmm. Kill your father and we'll let you go, or go on a killing spree or whatever. Yeah. They say that, and no human's brain is going to come up with that naturally. It's a joke. And this is just classic torture.
So what he complained of, and what I wrote about and complained about, it's something that's just in the script of once you become a CIA or FBI, this is how you're trained to manipulate the individual.
Yeah. These are scripts, and that's how they're trained. They go through them. I've listed quite a few of them in my book, Project Soulcatcher, but I'm coming out with what's called a no-touch torture document that parallels all these tortures that TIs go through, exactly follows the torture methods that have already been disclosed in the Senate Intelligence Committee summary of CIA torture methods.
Now, with your knowledge of all of these different technologies, microwave technologies, are they capable of causing heart attacks that you know of?
Yes, they are, and this was actually written about in the 1970s, supposedly by Russians that were ahead of us in this technology, but that's just how they get their budgets. We're ahead of them. That there is a way to cause such stress to the cardiovascular system, a runaway spooking, if you will, using these terror tactics, and that's what it is, it's domestic terrorism, to stress the heart enough that it can collapse if there's a weakness, or to cause a stroke. So they call it a remote heart attack.
A remote heart attack.
Yeah.
Using remote technology. I mean, that's, I'm laughing now, but it's a very scary reality for those of us who are targeted individuals. Also, I've had times, and maybe you can explain this, I don't know if you can or not, but I have images that are, in my book I wrote about how when I was a kid, they would tell me, they would show me images, and they would say, well, go show it to me on television, what we just showed you, and I would literally go flip through the channels and find the cartoon that they had just, the person speaking to me had just put in my head. I mean, is that possible that they can turn my brain into a television?
Only if they're watching it at the same time. Usually what they do is they pipe in very scary mental images. So in physical torture, they'll use barking, growling dogs or insects, putting them on the person, things like that. With the no-touch torture, they usually use more mythological creatures like demons and such, and pipe those into the person's head. And they're being visually cloned to some extent. So under usually darker lighting, the person's what's called the visual workspace in the human mind will see this image and have some sort of reaction to it. So they're usually scary images.
And they can do the same thing, while you're asleep with dreams. Pretty much create your whole dream routine.
Dream manipulation. Again, people won't believe this technology is actually here. And there's so many awesome uses for this technology for good. I mean, imagine your partner, your life partner, you can share a dream with them and you're both in it. I mean, it's just awesome. But right now it's just being used for evil, and it's part of the manipulations. American Indians always thought their dreams were from God, and so it's a way to manipulate a person and reprogram them even in their most vulnerable state, which is sleep.
And these weapons, they're calling them the voice of God. These are God weapons of God, pretty much.
Well,
because they can mimic all what humans believe God can do.
Exactly. And so 95% of the world is God-fearing, and so they call them voice of God weapons because you can say, lay down your weapons, this is Allah speaking to you. And people,
They've actually did that, didn't they? And there's a storm, I believe I read somewhere.
I can't confirm or deny that.
That's maybe the NDA, folks. I don't know, but I respect it either way. But the earlier, we were talking about how they make you feel emotions. If you research, they did it to Wall Street protesters. So if you guys do any research to figure out, has this technology been used against American people, other than just myself talking about it, the Aaron Alexis or the Myron May, you can quite possibly find out that yes, this exists. How many people would you think are targeted individuals?
I get asked that question a lot, and all I can do is a minimum 10,000 worldwide, 2,000 in the United States. And you have to imagine, they can only collect so much data doing this. And the Pentagon had a paper that we can falsely imprison and abuse 1.6% of any population without a successful revolution. So it may be as high as 1.6% of any population. So there's a huge margin of error. The only people that come forward are those who know how to use the internet, make phone calls, and so I know I'm underestimating, but right now 10,000 is
that's worldwide.
Worldwide, 2,000
euros. Barry Trower. If you guys do any research about this, you might find Barry Trower. He's a British Naval Intelligence agent over in London. He actually admitted that citizens would be brought into this particular program. They would be made to seem like they were mentally ill. That then they would hire a psychiatrist that was unknowing to the experiment. And if the psychological evaluations came back as schizophrenia or delusional or anything like that, that was considered a success. And the test subject would be locked up. The people who are doing this didn't even care.
Well, that's right.
So I mean, this type of technology and this form of torture has existed for several years. I don't know what it's going to take for you guys to believe this, but I'm someone who's really tried in my life, and I don't think Duncan would be out here trying to expose this. I mean, we don't get any money from doing this. I mean, to be quite honest with you, everything's been taken from both of us. I don't know about you, but I don't see you living in a multi-million-dollar home, driving a Ferrari or a Lamborghini.
Greed is not a motive of mine, no.
Hey,
I'm here to help the human race. I understand.
And I really appreciate your help, because without you, these young men here wouldn't have had any kind of proof to say that this is what, here's someone who can admit at least that what we're trying to say is real, very real.
And people, and that's, I think, one of the points that you're making for this film is a lot of it's for family of people who are targets, that, you can believe what you want, what the psychiatrist will say, but remember they're just trained by textbooks. There's no real science behind it, that industry. There's no blood draw that you can get that will prove mental illness. And so what the target, the victim, wants their friends and family to understand is, this is happening to me, this is real. Give them comfort words. Just say, yes, I believe you. I'm sorry, I don't know what to do for you, but this, I do believe you, this is happening.
And that would have helped these young men
That would have
here.
helped those two.
I truly believe it, because in my life, my family, once they really, I hate to say this, but it took Aaron and Alexa's story, I believe, for my family to really, get into what's really going on. And, the families would be more understanding about this, and I'm hoping that
there would be less frustration,
yes,
and then less events like this occurring.
Yes, exactly. Well, Duncan, thank you so much for the interview today.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You have
Pleasure.
a wonderful evening.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, we're recording. Well, we have Dr. Robert Duncan here, and he's in the theatre on the, there's the theatre. It's not great, isn't it great? And that's spelled the correct way, by the way, with the ER.
Yeah, with the
So, what are you doing, and how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me to this conference, Miles.
Well, the last time we met was at the Super Soldier Summit in Henderson.
That's right.
A couple of 3 years ago?
2 or 3?
2 or 3 years, yeah. And that was all about super soldiers. There were some other characters here, like Sarah Adams and Max out here.
Yeah.
Of course, I was so important, being from Northern Ireland, I opened the show.
You did.
I mean, there was some guy the night before, like the governor of Nevada or something.
Yeah.
Well, he was there.
Yes, I remember.
But to be honest, your stuff is fascinating, and what do we have to offer here?
Well, I will be speaking about human augmentation and cyborg technology in this first presentation. And then tomorrow night I will be speaking about cybernetics, connecting minds. It can be rats to monkeys to humans, it doesn't matter what brains they are. And I will be giving a warning to the human race at the end of the presentation.
Are you talking about assimilation here?
Well, it is kind of a simulation. It's a global brain project, but I'm also going to talk about something, Project Bluebeam.
Ah.
You've heard of it.
No, I've heard about that a long time ago, but there's a lot of stuff about it which isn't quite right. Now, my version of it is it's a direct thing in the mind where you think you're actually somewhere that you're not. It's individually transmitted to you, and you think you're actually having this particular thing, like an
experience or induction. Absolutely.
Right.
But it's part of the New World Order agenda to make people believe they are being abducted. And so they will give up their free will and ask a government, a world government, to fight against this, whatever it is.
Now, this is very important, because the whole point of the Barry King's thing way back 20 years ago was the construction of fake aliens in bases in Berkshire.
That's right.
And this is really
it's part of it. And these technologies are now coming about, and this can be done, and it's just a matter of time. And supposedly the leak came from NASA, but I do know they are working on these artificial projects. I'm also going to talk about holography in the sky that the military can do.
Which isn't actually holograph. It isn't a hologram in the sense that the technical...
No, you're right.
Yeah.
It's a different technology, but it still creates three-dimensional shapes and orbs and saucers and stuff like that. But it's beams that intersect, that excite the air molecules to radiate light. And so you can't see the beams, but where they intersect, you can create all sorts of...
Is that a scalar thing, or...?
No, it's not scalar. They're using it now in Japan to create a three-dimensional television. And you can touch the holograms too. You literally, and it feels like
this is about as close to the holodeck as we're going to.
Yes, we're getting closer and closer.
Which is, of course, not holographic. What is the actual technology?
Interferometry would probably be the best word for it. Yeah, it's not quite holography in the sense of a screen that you see a three-dimensional image. This is truly three-dimensional.
4D, really. You can walk around it.
You could walk around it, absolutely. Yeah, and you can touch it, and it can sense when you touch it. So it's pretty neat.
So it's got reverse sensing. It's got a feeling. It can send it back.
Yeah. So it can tell when you touch it, and you feel when you touch it. It's like a little electric shock.
And really, it's just down to resolution.
Yeah, and so right now it's a small resolution, but the military obviously scales everything much larger. And they use femtometer lasers to do it.
Femto?
Femto is 1 × 10 to the minus 15.
Wow.
Very short time frames to shoot these light things.
That's small.
Very small.
That's a lot of 50. You need. Oh my God.
So you need a lot of power in a very small time frame.
Which means you've got access to super generational power system to do it. Not quite a diesel generator. It's
no, it's not a diesel generator, but
it'd be something else.
Yeah, it'd be something else.
So they must have access to supremely high levels of power.
Yes, absolutely.
Conveniently, without creating a big signature somewhere.
Yes.
Or dimming the lights in Honey Street.
No, nothing that extreme.